Okay. I know you can go.
Give you up. Good morning, everybody. I'm Peter Brace, Chairman of the other committee. Chairman of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. I will now read the script for remotely conducted open meetings. Good morning. This open meeting of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee is convening by video conference pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. This meeting is being recorded. Please be aware that other people may be able to see you, and take care not to share your device's screen. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Please silence all phones and devices. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. Use the raise the hand feature in Zoom to indicate that you'd like to offer a comment. The chair will call on those who have raised their hands in the order they were raised. All questions should be directed through the chair. If you're not able to participate in the remote meeting, you may also submit comments to the Coastal Resilience Coordinator, Leah Hill, and request that they be read into the meeting record. Her email is lhill@nantucket-ma.gov. I am the chairman of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. My name is Peter Brace. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Okay. Doug Rose.
Here.
Tim Brain.
Here.
Gary Beller.
Here.
Rachel Freeman.
Here.
Sarah Boyce.
Here.
Christy Kickham.
Here.
And Peter Brace, of course, is here. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Leah Hill.
Here.
Vince Murphy.
Here.
Okay. Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmatives. Ian Golding.
Peter, it's just the people on the agenda, so that's Daniel and
sorry.
Courtney.
Okay, so Daniel Padian.
Present.
Okay, Courtney Rocha.
Here.
Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yes.
Okay. Matt Fee.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. All right. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote in no particular order. So, public comment. Does anyone have any public comment? Is there any member of the public that has a comment that has to do with nothing on the agenda? So, nope. Okay. We're going to have a presentation and a following discussion with Courtney Rocha, the Southeast Regional Coordinator for the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, MVP, about MVP's Action Grant. Okay, Courtney.
I'm ready. I can take it away.
You can take it away, share your screen if you need to, whatever you got to do.
Okay. Okay. So, let's see. Okay, you can see my screen okay?
Yes.
Great. First off, I just want to thank you all for having me today. I'm excited to talk to you and answer any questions about the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, or the MVP program. My name is Courtney Rocha, she, her, and I am the Southeast Regional Coordinator. So the agenda for this meeting is an overview of the MVP program, what the MVP program's core principles are, the details on the next funding round. Then I'll go over MVP projects, coastal resiliency projects that we've funded in the past. We'll talk a little bit about Nantucket's coastal resiliency action items, and we'll leave some time for question and answers. Feel free to stop me anytime if you have questions. It's better that we answer them in the moment. I'm hoping that this is more of a conversation, so please don't feel like you need to be silent the whole presentation. So first, I just want to put up the definition of what climate resilience is. There's a lot of jargon in this field, but climate resilience is the ability of a community to address the needs of its built, social, and natural environment to anticipate and cope with climate change events. And so we're really looking at all three: built, social, and natural environments. How can we evaluate the vulnerabilities to the built, social, and natural environments, and then improve them through grants and planning? So MVP has these core principles. They're really the pillars of the program. This is exactly how our projects are scored. You'll see in our RFR explicitly how we score projects, so pay attention to that. But really, it all boils down to these core principles. And there's so much you can fund with climate change. It will affect every aspect of our lives. So the MVP program really focused in on one, nature-based solutions. Those are green solutions that protect, restore, and manage natural environments. And also improving outcomes for environmental justice communities and priority populations. Priority population is a population that may not be explicitly in a mapped EJ area, but they are certainly more vulnerable to the effects of climate change. So our seniors, youth, disabilities, minorities, people of color. So any of those that might not be specifically in a mapped community EJ, but are certainly disadvantaged or have been left out of the conversation in the past. So the way we want to use our funding is to help the most vulnerable to the effects of climate change, that being environmental justice or priority populations, or the largest geographic area possible. So that would mean multiple benefits to a broad section of the community, solutions that are transferable and innovative and think beyond borders. So we incentivize regional projects. We really want to be a place, MVP wants to be a place where you can push the boundaries, but we also won't permit anything that DEP, we won't fund anything that DEP won't permit. So we work closely with them during our grant evaluation. We want projects that can continue beyond the period of performance, and we really prioritize community engagement, education, things that will build capacity within the town, whether it's green jobs training or environmental curriculums. So things that can build capacity within the community, such as building relationships. So if you haven't heard of MVP before, we have two buckets of funding, one being a planning grant and one being the action grant. The planning grant is a prescribed planning process that at this point, 99% of the municipalities in the Commonwealth have gone through. The result is a planning document with priority actions, similar to the Coastal Resiliency Plan, but it's an MVP plan. Now, because 99% of the Commonwealth has gone through this planning process, we've now updated it and we're calling it MVP 2.0. This is an update and a prescribed process on how to update your planning grant. This will open in February of 2024 and will close in March or early April of 2024. And this is open to municipalities with old or expiring plans. So if your plan is 5 years old or older, you're going to have to go through this process to update your plan. At the end, there's no big planning document. It's a community-led workshop, a series of community-led workshops and trainings to improve your planning grant or any planning that has done in the past. It's $45,000 for planning and $50,000 for an implementation project of any kind. And this is essentially non-competitive for municipalities with expiring plans. But since Nantucket's plan is not expiring until next year, 2025, I'm predominantly going to talk about action grants today. So action grants, just a quick on the timeline, they're going to open in March and close 8 weeks later. They're open to all MVP certified communities. Nantucket is, of course, one. We give $3 million per project and up to $5 million per regional project. And this coming grant round will have at least $20 million available and potentially up to $30 million. This is a map of all of the planning, all those who have done our planning process, and the blue dots represent ongoing action grants. This is 1 year old, so all the map is blue at this point. And you can see that our dots are concentrated around Boston, but we really fund projects all over the state. From the last round, we had 92 applications. We over 26 million was requested, and we funded 66 projects. So we were able to fund 2/3 of the applications to our program. We gave out $20 million, and the average grant size was $312,000. That is a little larger. We had a grant, a land acquisition grant for $4.5 million. It was a regional partnership, but removing the outliers, our average grant was probably $100,000 to $200,000. I've gone over a lot of this already, but we require a 25% match with some exceptions, and we are a reimbursement program. The projects, like I said, the RFR will come out in March. The Q&A period is 2 weeks. Applications are due 8 weeks later. And we typically announce at the end of the summer with projects starting in early fall, September, and then they would go to June 2024 or June 2025 of 1 or 2 year grants. Right now, we have an expression of interest out, similar to what MEMA does, or a statement of interest, where you can fill out a short form about your project ideas. It goes to the whole MVP staff and relevant state agencies, and you would get a broader feedback on your project. So that is open for another month until December 15th. Where you can submit any action grant project ideas and get feedback from the whole team. So if you need the link or are interested in that, please reach out and I can help you find that form. We fund all sorts of projects from planning to construction. So I talked earlier about our prescribed planning process, but we will also fund any further planning that you wish to do on any element of a project, vulnerability assessments, capacity building, design and permitting, all the way up to construction. Does anyone, before I go into action grant examples, does anyone have any questions about the MVP program in general?
I got a question about the application.
Yep.
How much weight does the environmental justice communities issue, how does that figure in when we're applying? Because it's eventually, probably sooner than later, we'll need to have our plan translated into Spanish, maybe Portuguese. And is that a box that we need to check when we're applying? Or would that just apply if the grant that we were applying for had relevance to an EJ community on the island?
What do you mean by translating in the box that you need to check about?
Translating our English version of the Coastal Resilience Plan into Spanish, into Portuguese.
Are you looking to apply for funding to do that action?
No. What I'm saying is, if we're applying for an MVP grant,
yep.
Are we required to have our, for whatever the grant's for? Chances are, and Nantucket's a small place, so the grant is going to pay for something that's going to affect a lot of people, and most likely people who live in the EJ communities. So I'm wondering on the application, Is it a requirement that the plan be in Spanish and Portuguese and all the major languages?
No, it's not it's not a requirement.
Okay,
No, it's not. And the plan, it's that, you know, the coastal resiliency plan, that's what you're talking about?
yes, our coastal resilience plan.
No, it's not required that it be translated. That's not, we wouldn't require past work to be
Okay,
factored in. But for example, for construction projects that, you know, you might not have as much community engagement on construction projects, we will factor in any engagement you did prior with environmental justice or priority populations into the construction project as a whole.
okay. We've got a couple more questions. I've got
Yep.
Sarah Boyce, go ahead.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, Courtney, I was just, one thing that jumped out was when you were at the very beginning, you're talking about the fact that MVP prioritizes or incentivizes regional projects. And obviously, as an isolated community, we have a hard time doing some we've been part of a few regional projects, like with the vineyard. But I'm curious about your thoughts on, are we less competitive on some potential grants because we have a harder time being regional when we're so isolated?
No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, there are, I would say most projects are one municipality. And it's a small subset of points of the whole project. But we're really looking at the project itself. And you can also, if this project is transferable to other communities, it also makes it more competitive. I mean, the islands are a very unique situation in terms of being, the problems that you face there are unique to being an island itself. It's very different. So I wouldn't say that would hurt you at all. I mean, maybe you wouldn't get full points for it being regional where we have multiple towns working together. The only place it would, I wouldn't say hurt, but limit is that regional projects get up to $5 million. So the maximum that Nantucket could apply for in one grant is $3 million. But we typically don't see projects that large.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Courtney. Leah, go ahead.
Thanks, Peter. Courtney, I just had a question about that first box. It says regulatory updates. Can you touch on that a little bit? Like what some examples would be, and is it just town regulations that for updating, or?
Yeah, so an example would be Mashpee took a part of their MVB grant to look at their wetland bylaws and do some community outreach around what the bylaws would be. And then they rewrote new bylaws for their wetlands in a specific area. So then after the MVP grant, they were actually adopted, and they were one of the 3 towns in Massachusetts to increase their buffer zone from 100 feet to 150 feet. And then they also reduced boat speed in specific ponds. So yeah, looking at your regulatory, your zoning, re-looking at your zoning and what that would mean, we would definitely fund that. I mean, even if it has to do with affordable housing and different uses, we as a program find that affordable housing directly relates with climate resiliency. So you could really make the case for whatever zoning you would like to do. It could be applicable to MVP. Any other questions? These are all great questions. Thank you so much. I'll just quickly go through some examples, maybe to get the wheels turning, and then we'll go into the resiliency actions from the Nantucket's Coastal Resiliency Plan. This is a study that was done in 2022 in Marshfield. Marshfield developed a long-term coastal resiliency plan for a subset of Marshfield. This is a large neighborhood that faces a lot of flooding. And they evaluated risk factors and also collected asset inventory. So they found what was there, businesses, homes, the elevations. And then they drafted zoning recommendations. They didn't put them into effect, but they drafted some examples of what a trigger bylaw would mean. So if a certain storm of X size caused X amount of damage, what would it mean for us to not rebuild in this area? What could bylaws look like in this coastal area so we're not rebuilding after a certain amount of damage? And then they did a benefit cost analysis for homeowners, for flood proofing, raising, doing a home buyout, and other options for homeowners who live in this floodable area, and looked at 20, 30, 50, and 70. Then they did a lot of public engagement. It was, they had a lot of difficult conversations here. But I thought the resultant document was really interesting. So if you're interested in looking at the final product from this, be more than happy to share that or any of these. So because it is the state, funded by the state, I can share any deliverables with you. The next we have the Cape Cod Low-Lying Road Study. Some of you already might be familiar with this. So completed in 2023. In June, 6 towns went through a low-lying road study. And ongoing right now is another 6 towns. So we have 12 towns in the Cape working with the Cape Cod Commission and Woods Hole Group to do a low-lying road assessment. And what they did is they used the MCFRM, or the Massachusetts Coast Flood Risk Model, to look at vulnerable sections of road. And then they did robust community engagement to help rate the roads in terms of emergency access, environmental justice access, nature-based solutions, and priority. So flooding and the town working together were able to rate the criticality of the roads. And then for each town, they developed 2 concept designs for the top 2 roads. And the funding amount was similar, it was around $300,000 for 2 years for each of the grants. This is a study in Hull that was completed, and they are going on for their 2nd year now. This is a climate adaptation roadway. So Hull, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but this little section is a peninsula out from Hull, and looking at the different design horizons, 2050, 2070, there will be some connectivity between the 2 ocean sides across the peninsula. So the town is doing some design work to evaluate what it would mean to put in flood storage or accommodate the flooding and potentially move some of the houses away from this area. Lots of community engagement, lots of conversations to be had, and they're developing an adaptation toolkit and then some alternative analysis and feasibility analysis for their solutions. And then this is a project that I worked on a couple of years with Falmouth. Their sewer main and piping for all of Woods Hole is exposed on the coast here. This is Surf Drive on the picture on the bottom, and you can't see it here, but that is the sewer main. And so they evaluated what it would mean to raise the road here, raise the sewer main, or different options for relocating it. They worked with the community, had lots of focus groups, and they did an alternative analysis to vulnerable sewer infrastructure, also pump stations and lift stations, and where they would have to move. Plymouth in there's a 2-year grant, 2022, 2023. This is a super interesting project. One of my favorites is they evaluated subterranean resiliency in their community. So they wanted to know when and how much salt water was going to get into their wells now and in the future. And so they worked with UMass Amherst to develop a model. The model was fed by citizen science, who the Pine Barren Alliance trained citizens within the community to go out and test wells that fed the model so that they could develop this analysis on when that they would see more saltwater intrusion in their wells based on increased development and also sea level rise at the same time. Not only that, they worked with the One Water Living Observancy to get the word out about what drinking water means in the town. They worked with 2 Wampanoag tribes, the Herring River at the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe and the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, to do different education and outreach events about clean water and drinking water. They also held a community water pledge. The League of Women's Voters was involved, and they did a climate change book club and education at the library. So it was all encompassing, from engineering to community oriented, all the different factors it takes to bring a community together about drinking water in their town. Next, we have the Belle Isle Marsh. I have one more after this, so I'm almost done. This is in Winthrop. This is the last remaining salt marsh in Boston Harbor. It's an area of critical concern, and they're working with their consultant to figure out nature-based solutions to prolong and help this salt marsh survive in the future. And it's also critical habitat for shorebirds. So they're working with neighbors and abutters to figure out what is the solution here long-term. This is a planning project, not design and permitting. So preliminary first steps of what the future of Belle Isle Marsh will look like. And lastly, we have Gibson Park Resiliency and Recreation. This is a design and permitting for a project that is a park, but also will accommodate and store floodwaters. They factored in bioswales, rain gardens, marsh restoration, and a living shoreline with 500 gallons of subsurface stormwater storage, and with a community park on top. So this is an interesting project. I don't know much about it because it's not in my region, but I think it's a great graphic. In addition, we've also done land acquisition in Mattapoisett to serve as flood storage. So those are also nature-based solutions, just preserving land, but I know that might not be as relevant in Nantucket. So that being said, we have all of our action grants online, so you can click around and see even more coastal projects we've funded since 2018. And then if you have any questions or want information, you can reach out to me and I can provide you with more information about the project. I'll stop and see if anyone has any questions.
Yes, okay. Courtney, you've got one question here from one of our members, Gary Beller. Go ahead, Gary.
Hi, Gary.
Hi, Courtney. Thank you. Very interesting presentation, and it's certainly a program that I hope will be successful in getting the benefit of. My question relates to, I noticed that in the various grants that are shown over the last several slides, the amount of the match is different. In some cases, it's just 25%. In one case, I saw the match was over 50%. Question is the match the amount that the local community is required to put up? And the second question is, as part of the award process, is the amount that the community is willing to match for these programs is that part of the decision-making process as to who receives the grant?
Great question, Gary. So we only require 25%. If you're giving 50%, we're not going to prioritize the project more, because that would be inequitable to communities that are barely getting 25%. Match is really difficult. So we just want to see that you make 25%. The reason I think you're seeing more is because they wanted to showcase that they were probably leveraging other federal or community funding. So if you are working on a project and you're also getting federal money for that, that is match. In-kind hours. So anyone who is working on this project, your time and hours are also matched. So it can be a combination of cash from the municipality itself and also in kind. So volunteer and staff time is also matched.
You know, the other question, Peter, if I may, the other question.
Yes, go ahead, Gary.
You mentioned that the funds are provided post completion. Is that how the program works? First, the community spends the funds, and knowing that they have been given the grant, but the funds only are returned to the community after the project is continued. Is that how it works?
Great question. And unfortunately, we are a reimbursement program, which I don't love, but it's not the whole project. It's when you do your budget, you'll break up certain tasks. So we'll have this community meeting and then we'll do design here. And each task, once that is complete, it's reimbursable. So it's not the whole project. You can break the project up. I usually work with my communities to figure out, we'll take a break at December and say, okay, how much money have you spent? Let's try to get you reimbursed. Or I can always work with you if it's difficult to reimburse upfront. So we can be accommodating to that. But yes, after the task is complete, not the whole project, just whatever you identify as a task, then we can reimburse.
Thank you.
Sarah, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, Sarah, go ahead.
Thanks. Courtney, thank you so much. And I really appreciate those examples that you shared that were maybe relevant or kind of across the board, help us think about potential uses here in Nantucket. I have a sort of general question, and I don't know if this is something that you can answer or if it's something that we just have to go through each project and look at. But do you have a feeling for how many of these projects are that municipal with collaborations with either other other regional or local partners, like other nonprofit organizations and things like that, versus or consultants? So I know, like, obviously when a project is attained, like say the grant is written and you're going to do a project, obviously there's like a lot of these projects involves consultants and contractors and people that work on it. Maybe this is a two-part question, but I'm interested in how many of the projects do you know anyway were written in collaboration between the consultant and the municipality? Because I feel like that's something that I feel like we could pursue or we should be pursuing, and I'm interested to hear if you have a feeling for like success rate with that. If you know.
For consultants that write the application.
We're like, well, the municipality works with the consultant to write the grant. If you have
that
an
that happens. We don't know explicitly which ones are which. We can tell.
Yeah.
We tend to have a soft spot for communities that are writing them themselves. Right. So we're not going to say, oh, you wrote this with a consultant, we're not going to award you. But we try, when we're reading the applications, we try to evaluate what is a good project and go from there. I think that sometimes working with a consultant can help you flesh out the ideas and get, your budget squared away and your scope squared away, which I find a lot of municipalities have trouble with. But that is what consultants do. So that can help because we really are looking at the scope and seeing how clear it is. And so that's really helpful. I think the one thing that will really benefit you, other than working with a consultant, because we don't require you to know who your consultant is, but finding partnerships within the community that can help you, that's really going to help your application. So those who have, we fund what's called community liaisons. So someone from an environmental justice group who wants to give input for their community on a project, you can pay them for their time. So we're just like you would pay an engineer, we're paying people for their lived experience. And that really bolsters partnership and engagement with the community in a project. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
No, that's great. Thank you so much. That's really helpful.
Great.
Great. Thanks, Courtney.
Vince?
Vince, go ahead.
Thank you, Peter. Hi, Courtney. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks. So I'm interested in another part of Sarah's question and the collaborative part of it, but I just kind of want you to clarify something, if that's okay, please. So
Yep.
Is it the case that it's open to all municipalities, but it's also open to all 501c3 type nonprofits as well? They could independently apply, but it's probably best to go down the collaborative route, working with nonprofits and other island partners.
Great question, Vince. And I'm sorry if I wasn't clear, but the project, the way our funding is through an environmental bond, we are only allowed to award funding to municipalities, environmental subdivisions of the Commonwealth, and federally recognized tribes. So what that means is some planning agencies are eligible to apply, like the Martha's Vineyard Commission can apply. Some water departments can apply, and the Wampanoag tribe of Gay Head and Mashpee Wampanoag tribe are eligible to apply for our grants. And so what I was saying with partnering with nonprofits or community organizations is that they have certain relationships within the community already that it would help bring more partnerships and collaboration across the community to the project. So the municipality will be awarded the funding, and then you would distribute the funding to your consultant, community liaisons, or community business organizations.
Awesome. Thank you, Courtney. Are there any more questions from our board, from the committee? Okay, Sarah, go ahead.
Thanks. Just really following up, Courtney, you were mentioning that if we wanted some more information about any of the projects that you could provide it, or I'm personally interested in more in the Marshfield project. The way you described it, some of the things like the buyouts and discussions about the cost benefit analysis and rebuilding after, climate related storm, whatever it was. I think that's really pertinent to a lot of the tough discussions that we're talking about having here in Nantucket. Is that like information that, obviously there's a blurb on the website. Is there information about more of that project on your website, or is that something that we should reach out to you to get a little bit more information?
I think there's a blurb on the website, but there is a final report that I can send you.
Okay, that would be great. I mean, maybe all of them, but I think the Marshfield one I'm particularly interested in.
Okay, so if you have my email, if you could just reach out after or get it from Peter or Leah, I would be more than happy to share that. I think it was a great project. It was difficult. And so for those types of projects, this group didn't, but Plum Island also did a similar project where they evaluated the costs and benefits of maintaining the causeway to get out to Plum Island. And they brought in a consultant called the Consensus Building Institute, where that consultant had expertise in having difficult conversations. So they're not exactly engineers, they're just mediators. So we would also fund that. So I know Martha's Vineyard has Martha's Vineyard mediators, but if you have anyone on island or a consultant that is equipped with having difficult conversations and these types of studies, maybe you bring them on for a meeting or two, might be really interesting to have.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, because I think we all recognize that moving forward with discussions of, building anything around people's homes obviously is a very touchy subject. So it's great to know that that mediation factor is even considered as part of the funding. So thank you.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Courtney. Gary, go ahead.
You're on mute, Gary. Happens all the time.
Can't hear you, Gary. You're still on mute.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, thanks, Courtney. Sorry about that. There's a pink dot on Nantucket. What is that project that you have a pink dot on right there? I see.
So we funded a vulnerability assessment in 2019 or 2020 with Woods Hole Group, where they did a vulnerability assessment of the island. Or maybe it might have been focused on the downtown area.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Vince. Do you have an add-on?
If I could, Peter.
Courtney, if you don't mind, could you let me?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Vince, do you have something to say?
Yes, thank you, Peter. Greatly appreciated. It was the Resilient Nantucket Designs for Adaptation that was funded by MVP in 2019. It was the historic preservation one that looked at flooding against historic buildings that helped inform part of the CRP. It was done about 7-8 months ahead of the CRP, and started 7 or 8 months ahead of the CRP and was completed during the CRP, and heavily influenced how we looked at historic preservation. And it was an extremely massively useful document. Holly Backus was the project manager on it, and I was an assistant. Thank you, Peter.
Sure, Vince. Are there any other questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, are there any questions for Courtney from the public in attendance? Okay. All right. I guess we're done. Thank you very much, Courtney. Thanks for being
I
there
just
for us.
had some, I thought we would, if we have time, we can go over some of your adaptation item, your coastal resiliency plan action items, but if not, then I can talk separately.
You know, maybe 10 more minutes, but then we have other items on the agenda. We have another presentation and then the rest of the agenda. So I try not to go over 2 hours because we're all busy.
Okay, I'll
So-
keep it to 5 minutes. I'll keep it to
Okay.
5 minutes.
All right.
So I looked through all of the adaptation items. I have a couple of notes. The first thing would be that it would be a useful exercise to I know they're all they have target implementation dates, but going through as a committee and deciding how you would want to rate them in terms of priorities. This is our #1 action. This is our #2 action. There's a lot here. So deciding what to prioritize as a group, as an island, would be really helpful. I don't know if it's 1 through 14 here. Each section of the island is prioritized, but prioritizing them as a group would be really helpful. Secondly, a lot of the other island-specific downtown Mattakit area, there's a lot of dune restoration and nourishment, and as you all know, I'm sure you know that Nantucket is very dynamic. So making sure that you have the sediment transport studies and the backup for these designs before you move forward would be imperative. MVP doesn't typically fund dune nourishment or nourishment projects because of the longevity it would take to continue to nourish them. And we're looking at adaptation, changing the way we live in the face of climate change. So we would want to make sure that you have the studies to say, hey, if we do this nourishment, if we do this dune restoration, it can stay X amount of years and will provide us resiliency into 20, 30, 50, whatever the design horizon is. We tend not to fund short-term solutions. So keep that in the back of your mind. We want to fund longer term. And I know working for municipal government, you know, you're always trying to put out fires and there's so many projects that are right in your face, but making sure that the project can survive into the future is really important. And then the top that I think would be competitive with our program as is right now would be community outreach on property owners' resilience best practices. So that was part of the 2019 assessment that Vince talked about. One of the deliverables was a guide for homeowners on how to flood-proof homes, but expanding that to businesses, best practices on maybe they don't keep their inventory in their basement, or they have other options of storing their inventory during a storm. So they have that place where there's reducing damages to businesses and homeowners in preparation. And going a little further, the strategic retreat and relocation program would be very interesting. And I think that Nantucket would be one of the first in the state to really look at this, along with Marshfield. This is for an island wide, which I think would be great, but I also think that picking one of maybe your local projects on the South Shore, like the wastewater treatment plant, I'll stop scrolling, and figuring out what it would mean to do this as in one area, and particularly looking at the legal implications of retreat, because on an island, as you know, there's only so much space to back up. So taking a case study, what it would mean to relocate, and figuring out the legal, working with lawyers as part of your design team, lawyers, homeowners, and residents, renters, to figure out the path forward as a case study for retreat on the island. I think that would be so interesting and very necessary, really. So that is as quick as I can for your priority actions. There's a lot here, but if you'd like to talk more, you can email me or you can submit an expression of interest about your project idea for MVP, and then you would get feedback from the whole staff beyond just me. So I'll end it there. Thank you so much for having me. I hope I can be a resource, and please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you, Courtney. We have one question for you. Christy, go ahead.
Yeah. Courtney, thanks so much. That was great. Very helpful. Just a quick question. I'm sorry if I missed this in your presentation. I had to step off for just a second, but how is the program funded? How are you guys funded? Or how is that funded?
We are funded through an environmental bond bill, and we are also funded partially through ARPA funding. So we had the last round, or the previous round, we had 20 million of environmental bond funding and 10 million of ARPA funding. Or about.
Okay. All right.
But I don't
Cool.
foresee
Thank
our funding running out,
Great. Thank you.
hopefully.
All right, great. Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone. Thank you, Courtney. We're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, item number 5, discussion with Daniel Padian, Waterways Program Chief at Division of Wetlands and Waterways, Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, about the letter CRAC sent to Mass DEP in December of 2022, as well as coastal resiliency related topics and regulation updates from the state. Daniel?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm the Waterways Program Chief from SDEP for Chapter 91. I have with me Susan Yu. Susan, maybe you could turn your camera on. I don't know, maybe it's already on. Thank you. Susan's a member of my team in Boston. She's a project reviewer. My background, I spent 25 years doing commercial real estate development, and there wasn't a great opportunity at DEP, so here I am. Susan has been with the department. Susan, how many years?
8 years.
8 years. And I've been with the department for 4 years. I want to start out by acknowledging the long delay between the committee's letter to DEP and our response. It turns out that letter landed on our desk the day we were moving from one office to another after many, many years at 1 Winter Street. So I do apologize for the delay in that. And I hope that no one will take that delay as an indication of a lack of interest here. So thank you for having us. I'd be happy to take a look at to respond to some of the items in your letter. Let me pull up my notes. I'm sorry, I wasn't ready for that. So let me tell you a little bit about what DEP is doing. So your letter asks about soft solutions, reconstruction of seawalls, et cetera. As for the sake of, I guess for folks who might not be familiar with Chapter 91, Mass General in Chapter 91 regulates tidelands. Any existing flowed tidelands or any filled tidelands up to the historic high water mark. I could pull up a map later if we need to show where that line might be. Any new fill, any fill upon existing fill, any changes in use to fill tidelands, any structures within filled or flowed tidelands. All of those, I'll say all, there are exceptions, but nearly all of those pieces of work require a Chapter 91 approval from Mass DEP. There's a very long history of this program. It started in 1866. There are many, many thousands, actually, of Chapter 91 licenses, 31,000, something like that, that have been issued since that time. There are many, many that have been issued in Nantucket for all kinds of things. Frequently, we get requests that kind of run parallel to some of your questions here about how do we how would a public or private party rebuild a seawall, increase the elevation of a seawall, perform some sort of retreat, a managed retreat from a eroding shoreline, things like that. And in each type of case is a little bit different. We do have some considerations for the difficulty in replacing a seawall or rebuilding a seawall, as the case may be. We have just like the rest of the Commonwealth. We've been working on some changes to our regulations. Our regulations were written, the most recent version was, the last major revision was in about 1990. These regulations were not written to deal with climate change. There are numerous obstacles, certainly at least perceived obstacles, to climate resilient projects, to climate vulnerability projects. The department, we are presently working with the regulations we have, and we are working to assess projects on an individual basis as to how can we achieve the local public or private goals of these important projects within the confines of our existing regulations. There is more flexibility than, for instance, that you may hear from perhaps the commercial real estate community. For example, there is not a prohibition upon the placement of fill or new structures within flow tidelands. There are limitations to those, and such work would need approvals from Chapter 91. But coastal resiliency is a water-dependent use project, would be a water-dependent use project in many, many cases. And there's no prohibition on that. The restriction is that such fill be minimized to the extent practicable. So, and that also can be a moving target. Sometimes you have to think about, what is the project goal? What is the design life of the project? What is the design life of the seawall? For instance, are you designing that seawall to last to 2050, 2070, or an indefinite period of time, if you build in sufficient flexibility? So it's a bit of a moving target sometimes. But DEP we're looking to work with communities such as Nantucket, communities such as this, to be able to address these challenges in the future. Are there? I don't have a presentation to make, but I'd be happy to answer your questions. I know there were some items that we previewed in a smaller meeting yesterday.
Before I get to Matt P, I think a lot of us are concerned, Dan, about how our town, how our conservation commission is how we react to keep public access open as people are forced to move back or forced to adapt their coastal engineering structures or whatever they have on the coast, where the Chapter 91 license affords public access. And how are people going to, you know, it sounds like the DEP needs to, like you said, they need to revise their regulations to adapt to that, to adapt to sea level rise. So, you know, I guess we all have all kinds of questions about that.
So many of these things are challenges. You know, this certainly not the least of it. As you point out, a Chapter 91 license in nearly every case has a public access requirement. So if you use an example of a non-water dependent use, right? The basis for that approval is that suitable public access is provided. Even a water dependent use project, even a simple residential dock has a public access requirement. You have to be able to go up and around so you can continue along that shoreline. As sea level changes, sea level rises, storm surges increase, that obligation does not go away. The licensees are still required to provide for public lateral access, for open space, et cetera. Under the current regs, it is a challenge to how do you do that? But it's presently the obligation of the licensee to be able to continue to provide those that access. I know that there certainly will be, and probably are cases now where erosion or inundation or frequent reduces that, and it's those areas that we need to figure out how to address. We are working on 2 regulatory packages. The first one we're calling 1.0, Chapter 91 Resiliency 1.0, and we've been working on those for a little bit. They're not yet been published as draft regulations. We're hoping that will happen soon. That package seeks to make some I want to say less controversial changes, but perhaps we'll call it low-hanging fruit of the regulations that need to be addressed. One of the things that we're trying to do, presently our regulations require an applicant to consider historic sea level rise, much like the FEMA maps do. They look backwards. It's critically important that we look forward. That is I think the most important change that we're seeking. And as soon as we're approved by the administration to publish these draft regulations, we'll be doing so, and there'll be public hearing, public comment period. And that's really one of the founding elements of how do we move this thing into the future.
Okay, we have a question from one of our committee members, Matt Fee. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I know it's going to get worse in the future, the public access aspect, but what's the best way for Concom or an individual of the public to point out problems with access now? Especially on our North Shore, we have older bulkheads and older groins that have sort of blocked access. You can't walk the shore at low or high tide anymore. There's no stairs up and over, etc. What would be the proper way for the Concom or for the select board or for the public to ask for that access again? What's the right way to do that?
I think certainly the initial steps would be to identify what license, what approval was granted for the construction of the seawall or the groin, et cetera. And that, depending on the age of that, there could either be included in the text of that license an obligation to provide public access. That would certainly be the easier case where that obligation is stated. I believe, and I need to there's probably a bit of a legal matter as to what happens when the shoreline erodes and there's not a specific public access provision in an older license. Those licenses are subject to the terms of Chapter 91, and that law changes from time to time. Moving that obligation to the present day for a license that was written without that obligation, that's certainly a little more complicated. I don't have an answer for you on that. That's something we're going to have to work with our Office General Counsel to deal with in our future reg update. I don't have an answer for that.
Right. But we should bring it to DEP attention, send, or check the license. And if Concom's renewing, they could, add it to the license, et cetera, that type of thing. Or
So I did meet earlier this week with a few members of the committee and staff, and we've, there's 351 351 communities in the Commonwealth, and I don't know that all of them have Chapter 91 licenses, but certainly Nantucket has a lot. Rather than rely on some past records, maybe the town has, we're going to provide our current database and a copy of every license that has the word Nantucket in it, because that's an easier way for us to be able to provide that. So that will provide you with the data set, really. So the first trick would be to identify the license, and we're going to try to give you that tool to do the tools to do that with. If the town can't figure that out, we're happy to help. We have an office in Lakeville, we have an office in Boston, and both, my team is available to assist. We have a programmatic email, and it gets monitored daily, and such requests get processed pretty quickly. So we'll be happy to provide any information trying to figure out what license that is. And we'd be happy to receive your request for assistance. When you have an actual issue, it is easier for us to raise that up through the chain of command in a more expeditious way. When you have a specific example, and I'm certain I'll get 3 tomorrow, and that's just fine.
Thank you very much. That is all like really good news, because over the past 10 or 15 years when we've asked about it, what we've got back from the even our own staff is we don't have the information. It's up in Boston, it's hard to find, etc. If it's actually now been digitized and we're going to get it like that, that is a huge improvement, and I thank you.
I spend when I need a distraction, I work on the database, and we have others who are working on the GIS portion of it. There are really just over 31,000 licenses. Every single one of them have been through a text recognition software. That was one of the advantages of working at home for a couple of years. So they're all digitized. It's not I don't have a perfect database. It's far from it. But I'll tell you, I'm going to give you the data set. I'm going to give you the maps we have, and I'm going to search for the word Nantucket, and anything that pops up, you're all going to receive electronically. So.
Thanks, Dan. Gary? You're muted.
I keep going on mute so I don't disturb the meeting. Donald, thank you so much for being with us. My question is, who is responsible for enforcement? If there is an issue as to whether public access has been denied, is it up to the local municipality group? Is it the Conservation Commission? Is it the Select Board? Or is it up to the state, your organization? Or do we get in the middle of where the Conservation Commission or the Select Board may say that's a problem, and whoever the affected landowner is saying, oh, no, I don't think it's a problem. If you want to stop me, you'll have to get the state to stop me. Who's responsible for the enforcement?
So, thank you for the question. The state's jurisdiction under Chapter 91 extends to the historic high water line. So anything that's, let's say you have an eroding shoreline, and as that erodes, it's going further and further landward. Seaward of that high water line, I don't have jurisdiction under Chapter 91. So anything landward of that, I'm powerless to help. Well, probably powerless to help. Any structure that's licensed by the state, DEP would have jurisdiction over. And so there's a Southeast Regional Office in Lakeville, and there's one in Boston. And if something is for a water dependent use project, like a groin or a seawall or a dock, those are matters that would be handled in the region. I can provide your team with the specific contact information, and those requests would go there. I'm more than happy to have those items identified, copied to the programmatic email in Boston. If there's no response, et cetera, certainly I'm happy to get involved. If it's under a state statute, the jurisdiction would be with DEP. We have a lot of priorities. We try to get to everybody. The more detailed information we get about a complaint like that, the easier it is for us to respond. You guys are blessed to live on Nantucket, but it can be difficult to get out there, schedule that time. So it's really is incumbent upon, it'd be to your advantage to provide us with more detailed information about this specific issue.
All right, thank you, Dan. We have a question from another committee member, Tim. Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm new to this. I'm a representative of ComCom here on Nantucket, so this is pretty new stuff to me. So I just want to be clear. Basically, every dock or groin or seawall or geotube on Nantucket is, in theory, licensed by Massachusetts Waterways. Am I correct? Is that right? Or is
provided it's any such structure that's seaward of the historic high water mark.
Okay.
That is the in a perfect world, those would all be licensed. And I'll let you finish in 1 second. I very frequently receive information, we receive requests, et cetera. There's no license for this structure. I don't generally believe that when I hear that. And more times than not, considerably more times than not, some additional research identifies prior license. There are certainly docks out there that have no licenses, no question. But there are the vast majority of these structures that have been around for a while are licensed.
So an example, we recently got a request to rebuild some groins on Nantucket Harbor at somebody's property. In theory, would those be licensed? And if they're being rebuilt, does that request have to also go into Waterways as well as ComCom?
Well, let me answer the first part first. Are they licensed? They should be licensed, yes. There was a period of decades, actually, from about 1922 to 1975, when the authority under 91 rested with the Mass DPW, Department of Public Works. And actually all up until 83, I think, the jurisdiction to build, the authority to build such things rested with DPW. started with the Harbor Land Commission, went to DPW, et cetera. So the authority rested with that licensing authority. There are many cases where such things were built as a under a DPW approved contract, which is very similar to a license, but we have a harder time accessing those records. So the particular groin that you identified, we may have a license for it, but if it was built by DPW, by the state DPW, there may not be a license, there may be a contract. As that wasn't as it was approved, we would treat it as an approval, but the rebuilding of it would likely need a new license.
What were those dates again? I'm sorry.
The DPW took over the program in, I believe, 1922. And it held the program until 1974, 75, when the Department of Environmental Quality Engineering, or now DEP, was created.
Okay.
And then in 1983, the authority to do those things was given to DCR.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Dan. Thanks, Tim. If we have no more questions, and we've got 45 minutes left of this meeting, I know there are members of the public that might have things to ask. So we'll go to Ian Golding.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Dan, for being present. And so in the letter of November 30th, you got from the Select Board and CRAC, which starts off at the request of its Conservation Commission representative. That was me. And I've now stood down, and Tim Brain, who just asked that question, is now CONCOM's rep, and I'm chair of CONCOM at this point. And we actually sent you a letter 3 months before CRAC sent you a letter dated August 11th, 2022. And if I may, I'm going to read a paragraph because it's really relevant to the questions I'm going to ask you. And the paragraph reads, the Commission has been receiving applications for repairs to existing coastal engineering structures like bulkheads and groins over the past years, and is seeking some guidance on how these structures are reviewed under the Chapter 91 licensing process. Specifically, when these structures were licensed, on the ground, the on-the-ground conditions were surveyed and placed on plans. As time has passed, water lines have moved landward and resource areas changed, with water lines now against structures during most every tide cycle and cutting off reliable public access. Is there a trigger for an inspection against the Chapter 91 license where a remedy to the situation may be required? Does the license allow for reconstruction even with the original permit conditions no longer existing? As an example, whether the original structure being protected is no longer present or that the resource area has changed. How are these situations addressed? And we had, in particular last year, at 18 Washington Pond Road on the North Shore, as Matt Fee referenced, we have a licensed Chapter 91 bulkhead that now sticks out. It has a complete peninsular effect. And it was before it was licensed, it was built as a wooden bulkhead in the 1960s. Then it was changed to steel. Then it was licensed. And then the 1940s cottage that it was protecting was demolished, and a new structure was built there in 2008. So when the owners came before us 2 years ago, they claimed that under the license, they were entitled to repair it. And some of us argued that no, that the bulkhead should be removed because it's no longer protecting a pre-1978 structure. And not only was there no access available, even, especially at high tide and sometimes at low tide, but then it turns out that the access on the eastern end of this bulkhead was on an abutter's property. So they said that they couldn't put any access on the eastern end because they didn't own the adjacent property, to which we argued, well, it should be rebuilt to an extent that allows access. And then, of course, we got into the effect of ADA compliance as with sea level rise and these new dune buggy carts available for people who are ADA challenged. Should you have ADA compliance as an access component? So we would really like some definitive answers coming out of your organization, please. And thank you for listening to me.
That's a lot. Those are numerous questions. I have the letter, and I do have the letter in front of me, so I followed along to some of that. There's with regard to a trigger for an inspection, there is no in most, I think in most license cases, there is no specific requirement for an inspection, but the licenses require the licensee to maintain the structure as licensed. In fact, the maintenance just if someone is maintaining a structure as licensed, there's no approval required from DEP. If you're putting something back the way it was originally licensed, and that structure hasn't been gone for too long, and too long is 5 years. So if a structure fails due to a storm, et cetera, it can be repaired, it can be replaced. But if that structure or use has not been present for 5 years, then the license is no longer valid for that structure. I have a meeting later this week with someone in Gloucester who wants to rebuild a seawall that collapsed 20 years ago. It's not going to get to rebuild.
Yes. But Peter, if I may just ask one additional question. I mean,
And Ian,
yes,
keep
sir.
in mind, we have still some more of the agenda to go, so we can't do a lot of back and forth and discussion. And
Okay.
so just be brief, okay?
Okay. So I'll limit it to one question, and thank you, Peter, and thank you, Dan. So in this specific example, where the conditions no longer exist for where the license was granted, why can't it be removed? Why, if one could argue the license is no longer valid and the bulkhead should be removed?
I think it's unlikely that I need to see the license, but prior to 1990, the Chapter 91 statute did not apply to uses on land, but rather were for fill-in structures in the water. We didn't start regulating uses and buildings, frankly, until about 1990. That they are frequently shown on plans, but the approval was to construct a bulkhead, things like that. That's typically what you'd get. The provisions to use those to protect a prior structure, that was included, I wasn't there, but it included as a way to, as a compromise to, I think, to protect those structures that were present and are now susceptible to erosion. Should the structure be removed? It's hard to answer in the abstract. As I work with folks like the Department of Ecological Restoration division, the folks who are removing many, many dams across the Commonwealth, I'll tell you, my next question for that director is, when do we start removing the groins? Because I think, groins are also a problem. They protect one property at the expense of others. And I realize that I'm being recorded, and that's going to be a controversial comment, but I'm not a coastal geologist, so I do not have an agenda of let's remove all the groins, but it's a very complicated dynamic. Private property rights, these things were authorized, and yet they're causing issues. So it's something that needs to be dealt with, and I don't have the answers to how to deal with that. But a license is not forever. If the structure's gone, the structure, they can be removed, and forcing that removal, that's a little more difficult. I'm sorry, I don't
Thank
have
you very
specifics
much,
for you.
Dan. Thank you, Peter.
All right, thanks, Dan. If there are no more questions and no more comments, Dan, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for the explanation. We really needed it. We appreciate you attending.
I'm happy to, I appreciate the offer. These are important questions in these letters, no question. This meeting with many other agenda items is probably not the forum to go through all of the detail. I hear you try to be able to address the other items and respect folks' time. My team is eager to work with your committee, with your team, with your staff in trying to get clarity on some of these more specific questions. And it's my hope that the maps and the licenses and the map indices will be of great use to your team.
Sounds like they will be, according to Matt. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to a review of the CRAC annual report. I assume everyone's read it.
Peter, do you want
is there
me to
anything-
share my screen?
Go ahead, Leah.
Okay, I'll share my screen, and if people have edits, I can do it on screen. All right, so in the email, I expressed that I, tried to include everything that was on the agendas and through the minutes, but I wasn't staff member for the whole time. So if there's any edits or suggestions, things to take out or add in, please let me know. This will have to get approved at the meeting, and then it will get sent to town admin, so it can be included in the town's annual report. I don't
Okay,
see anything.
everybody's read it, and I'm here in silence. So is that to say that we like what she did?
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Sarah. Motion to approve was made by Doug Rose, second by Sarah Boyce. Roll call vote. Doug Rose,
Aye.
Gary Beller,
Aye.
Rachel Freeman,
Aye.
Tim Brain. Tim Brain? Tim, you there? Christy Kickham.
Aye.
Sorry.
Sarah Boyce.
I'm back.
Okay. It's the roll call vote, Tim. We're taking on the annual report. And I did Rachel Freeman, and I asked for you. Are you voting yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Sarah Boyce?
Aye.
Okay. Matt B?
I'll abstain. I haven't read it yet.
Okay. Chair votes aye. So there you go, Leah.
We got
Me
Abby
too.
And
and
Abby?
Joanna.
And Abby. You voted yes, Abby? I'm sorry.
Yes, I vote yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
And
Joanna
too. Me
And Joanna. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yep, I vote yes as well.
Okay, very good. Okay, public
And
outreach
thanks
ideas.
to Leah.
Right. Public outreach. Yeah, thanks, Leah, for giving me 3 mentions in the annual report as doing 3 annual reports. This, the harbor plan, and SHAB. Public outreach ideas and strategies from committee members. We have the topics below, but we also have whatever you guys might have thought of between the last meeting and this meeting that you want to contribute. So maybe Leah, go ahead, and then we'll take your ideas after that.
So the last couple of posts I think went pretty well. Some of them got a lot of likes, and some didn't, which is fine. There were comments that were, ranged from "this is great, thank you so much" to "I doubt it." This stopped scaring people. So, you know, it is what it is, and I think the majority of people are enjoying the post that Crack has put out every Thursday so far about you know, educating them about coastal risks and resilience efforts. And Doug and I have reached out to a bunch of organizations to see if they would be willing to share posts. So on Instagram, they can either share it right to their stories, or they can download another app to repost it on their account. I also just learned about collaborating. So we can collaborate with another organization, and it shows up both on the NRD account and then that collaborating organization. And I guess that's a really good way to get the word out more, because it hits all the people that are following the other collaborator as well. So I think that we should start doing that. And I did hear that if you collaborate with Reels, that gets to a wider audience. So I would suggest for some of our posts, maybe we do make them a couple videos. So, you know, have pictures and a voiceover or something like that. I think videos will also reach more of an audience for people that, you know, either don't want to read the whole post or don't know how to read. So it can get to audiences like that. Peter and I spoke with Florencia and Haley yesterday, and they recommend for posts to have it at an 8th grade reading level for social media. And you can kind of figure that out when you put it into a Word document. A lot of you have been sending me Word documents, which is great. There's a feature on there for accessibility, and so that can help out. They also said that you can use AI to help you with it as well, not to write your post, but to say, hey, does this make sense to an 8th grader or whatever? Because I know, you know, when you get to science in particular, it's hard to convey to the general public. So I think we need to be cognizant of that. Doug brought this up, and Doug, you can maybe speak about it, but he ran his post by his wife, and she was like, what does this mean? I don't know. But when I read it, I was like, oh, this makes perfect sense. But, you know, I'm in the coastal resilience trenches, so I know. So I think that's important too, to keep that in mind when you're writing your content. And I do have Doug's media scorecard up. If Peter, you want me to share my screen, Doug could talk us through that. He spent a lot of time putting this together, and I think it would be helpful to go over with the committee.
Go ahead, Leah.
Okay. All right, Doug, do you want to?
Yeah, great. Leah, I'm glad you pulled up the most recent one. Thank you. The one that was in the packet is so last week. This is the new and improved version, and it's color changes and whatnot. But the gist of what you're looking at here is an attempt to try to keep track of how we're doing. You know, I think it's one thing to try to get the message out. It's another thing to try to keep track of, are we making progress? And is there any basis for optimism or pessimism or what have you? I'll give you the headlines for me are that all things do begin with the Natural Resources Department, Facebook and Instagram pages. That's where the post has originated in each of the first 3 weeks. What's noteworthy is that after the intro appeared on October 25th, and it reached that audience, we started seeing progressive acceptance from now we're up to 8 different sharing organizations, including the town of Nantucket through Florencia, through their Facebook page. We've also added in, and thanks to all the folks in this meeting that have been cooperating on this, the Nantucket Conservation Foundation has shared, Nantucket Land Bank has chimed in, the Coastal Conservancy, Mariah Mitchell Association. This past week, this last Thursday's was also shared by the Acclimate Nantucket group, as well as the Nantucket Field Station. So you can see the footprint of our message is beginning to expand. I think one thing I would glean from our early experience has been that it's unlikely that we're going to find a large number of posters or organizations like these that are going to be or able to share every week's announcement. My hope is that each week they'll look at them because they'll be tagged. Leah's been posting these and then tagging all these organizations. They'll at least be aware of them, and then they can make the choice as to whether it would resonate with their audience or not. And I imagine that the organizations that are closest and most aligned with our mission are going to be the most receptive to reposting. And I think we've talked about this before. Any one announcement is probably not going to be very meaningful. I think what we hope to see over the next 6 months is a bit of a drumbeat, where you may not have seen every one of these announcements, but over the course of those 6 months, you might have seen several of them, and at least become aware of the fact that there's a thing called a coastal resilience plan, and that there might be something interesting that's specifically relevant to where you live on the island, or a special interest that you have with the island. And so it will trigger enough curiosity to get you to actually go and look at what that document's all about. If nothing else, you'll know what it means when people mention the CRP. So I'll pause there. Thank you for cursoring down. Leah is scrolling down to show you that we have assembled, I think, a little over 80 potential partner organizations out there. And some are very closely aligned. Others are, I would say, almost strange bedfellows. When you're talking about realtor organizations or other interest groups that really have nothing to do specifically with coastal resilience. But hey, it's a topic of pop culture interest within the islands community. They might have an appetite to share some of our messaging. So I'll pause on that and throw it back to Leah.
Looks like we have a question from Sarah.
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Thanks. Yeah, I think the posts are great, and it's getting obviously a lot of traction, and I really appreciate this tracking with the media scorecard. I think that really helps us evaluate like the effort that we're putting in. One thing that I've noticed that I think we should all think about is at the very beginning of each post, we should definitely say this is from the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee, because I know it's somewhere in there, and especially with Pete's first one, it was like an introduction, but it's on the Natural Resources Department website or Facebook page. I know that is our avenue, and it's a town organization, but it's not necessarily coming from the Natural Resources Department. And I think not that we're trying to separate ourselves, but we were trying to say like this information is coming from the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee. I don't know if that has more or less importance, but it's more to inform, like as Doug was just pointing out with all these different organizations, they, it might be just important to identify the post as coming from CRAC. That's kind of one thing. And then my only other thought with this would be I know it's really important to have the schedule so that people can be identified as who's writing what and have things done ahead of time. But I'd like us to build in the opportunity for being responsive to things, or kind of an issue comes up, or maybe there's a new flood, or there might be issues that come up that are in the collective comments of the community, or a storm event, or something that we can respond to. Because if we schedule too far out in advance, like we're already at like 6 months or something like that, which is helpful. If something comes up in January, we want to be able to say something. And so just keeping that in mind in that schedule.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. Gary?
One thing I noticed, Doug, in the chart, there was a whole group of the media companies, but are these notices going up? Is the outreach going to them every week now as well, to the current? And are they carrying it? Do we know that? In other words, if they're getting one every week from us, I haven't noticed that when I read the current on a daily basis. I read all about Saltmarsh and what they're having for lunch and what they're having for dinner, but I haven't seen what we're trying to educate the public about. So are these in fact going to these media outlets?
Leah, do you want to answer that one?
Sure, I can. So Gary, I tag them in the post. I have not gotten any response that they shared it on their, pages or on stories. To get it into the Daybreak or current email, we would have to contact them and they decide if it goes in. I know Sarah, I think, had mentioned at the last meeting that some of those you have to pay for. So I would have to explore that to see if we have to pay them to put it into their emails. And if that's the case, I'm not sure if we can do that or not. So I can look into that more. I definitely see the benefit of getting it into the email, once a week or once a month or whatever they may be able to do. But I'll look into that. And Peter, can I answer a couple of Sarah's questions or comments?
Yes, sure. Yep.
Okay. Sarah, I put it, the crack part, below the initial thing, because when you on Facebook, it only shows like three, the first three sentences, and then on Instagram a little bit more. So I guess we can open it up to the committee to see if you all want to have the boilerplate first and then the content of the picture second. So I'll leave that up to you.
Go ahead, Tim.
I just talked to Peter about asking why we hadn't focused more on the and Daybreak and Current and Inky Mirror. If you want, Sarah, I can, Leah, I can contact Bill Farrell at Daybreak and see if we can make some headway there. That helps.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Doug. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, just to add to what's already been said, I don't think it's likely that the Inky or Current is going to take our post and literally share it verbatim. I look at Leah's efforts to tag these organizations as part of education. Let's make sure that the folks that are in the editorial staffs of these various media at least understand the fact that there's the CRP and what's in it, and potentially treat them the same way we're treating any consumer. Let's intrigue them. Let's generate some curiosity. My hope would be that over time it will lead to more inquiries from them about, hey, tell us more about this project I saw you post about in Matticat or what have you. But I don't think it's likely, unless we're ready to pay for things, to have any of these independent advertising supported organizations just willingly reposting something that's coming from CRAC or NRD. The other thing I would just add, my personal vote would be, as Leah had suggested, I don't think it would be wise necessarily to have the same boilerplate paragraph leading every post, because the number of people that actually click to see more is probably going to be fairly small. And so what you end up with is essentially the same verbatim quote in every one of our posts, and no one even notices that there's differences in each week. So, maybe we can tweak the opening lines or two to get the word, to get Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee in there, but that's a lot. Certainly worthy of looking again, see if we can get it worked in. Thanks.
Okay, on that comment, Doug, I would say that we then just shift. We just always had it at the bottom. The lead for the post is going to be something different every week, which is going to make you want to look at it. And if you're actually a sensible, inquisitive human being, you'll read down to the bottom and see, oh yes, this is their post this week, and you'll get into the routine of that. And the other thing I would say about what you said is that we have to talk to the right people at the media outlets and try and get them to create a regular weekly feature that has a name on it, whatever they want to call it, as long as this has coastal resiliency in it, where our information gets plugged in. And I would think we'd start with one of them, and that maybe would have the others want to sign on once they saw that it was, say, the Current doing it or the Inky doing it. I mean, the Current's a good place to start, and Jason Graziadei, he's more than willing to make it work you're not going to get the same sort of resistance to things as you do if you go to some of the other outlets. So, you know, I could reach out to Jason and see what he thinks on that for sure. Joanna, go ahead.
I have a suggestion on this, actually. I think that if we wrote a press release that said that this is what we're doing, and we sent it to the outlets, the local outlets, then they'd be more inclined to doing. So I think we have to write a press release and say, the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee has determined a new strategy for educating the public. This is what we're doing. And send it to Daybreak and the Current and the Inky. And then I think you can follow up and ask them to, you know, from time to time, post or pull from what we're doing. And that way they will do that, as opposed to having any or all of us start contacting Jason, because I don't think in the end that would be super effective.
All right, thanks, Joanna. Leah?
Thanks, Peter. Joanna, that's a great idea. We should put that on the, well, you guys can decide, but, or Peter can decide to put that on the agenda for next meeting. But I think that, yeah, that's a great idea. Going back to Sarah's suggestion of having the social media timeline be adaptable, I totally agree. In the winter, since the work at the hatchery, you know, is a little bit less, there will be an opportunity of other days to be available for posting. So if, you know, storm events happen or anything applicable to coastal resiliency, I can either keep, you know, the timeline as it is and then have that extra post on like a Monday or something like that regarding what's happening now. Or we can just shift it. And so the thing that's happening, you know, the flooding or whatever that's happening now, that can be the post for Thursday, and then it just shifts the timeline down that you all approved. And I just want to say one more thing. When Peter and I met with Florencia and Haley, I asked her, should we continue to have these posts translated into Spanish, you know, going from now out? And she said, yes, it's a great idea. She is happy to translate that for us. And then she actually suggested that if we're doing that, then we should have the CRP translated into Spanish as well, because we're linking them, you know, we're saying, check the CRP out for more information. If they're a Spanish speaker, they go to the CRP and it's in English. So they do have some funding to do translations. So that's something that we can look into as well. She also suggested if there's pictures that have text on it that's in English, to have that translated into Spanish as well. I just want to update you all on that.
All right, thank you, Leah. Doug, go ahead.
I know we're short on time. Sorry. I just wanted to build on what Leah mentioned. I personally think that it's unlikely that very many people will actually sit down and read 286 slides. And this brings me back to the point I think I had made a couple of meetings ago. I do think there's an opportunity for us to put together at least a truncated version of the executive summary that we wouldn't ask people then to spend a week reading. It might take 20 minutes to read. And so I guess I would just ask that we consider that as a next step, have that created in English and then translated into Spanish. I think that would be much more doable, both for us as well as for the audience. Thoughts? I don't know what people think.
Okay. So I think it's, you know, I think it's not for us to decide who might read the plan. I think that it should be available in Spanish no matter what, and Portuguese if possible. And Florencia said it would take less than a week to do that. If it's in their budget, they can do it. And it should be available even if one person reads it, because you never know who's going to read it and be inspired and tell their friends about it. Also, another thing that Leah and I talked about with Florencia was ways, a page on the town's website that people click on it in the post that takes them to a specific topic that's within the plan. That'll be, like you said, it's synthesized, smaller and briefer for people to read on the major topics that are in the plan. And of course, along the way, there are links that will take you to the plan. But I think all the information, any opportunity we can to get the plan out there to everybody in as many languages as possible is what the outreach is all about. So we can't make those assumptions because we just don't know, Anyway, anybody else? Okay, everyone's okay. Leah, go ahead.
Thanks, Peter. Do you want me to share the survey on my screen now so that the committee can see what it's going to look like? Okay. So town communications put the homeowner survey online, or gave us the link, and I'll be sending it to the Civic League to have them disperse to the homeowner presidents. But I just wanted to show you all what that survey is going to look like online. Okay, so this is kind of the cover page, gives the blurb about what the committee's doing, what our intention of the survey is, and then it just goes question by question. So I'm just gonna randomly pick because you have to do that to move forward. So then it goes to the coastal hazard part, flooding. Concerns about your property or neighborhood for the future. And then, are you currently planning or implementing coastal resilience measures? And then what can the committee do? And then is there anything else that you would like us to share? So it's a quick survey that, took a couple minutes. So I'll be sending that out in the next couple of days to the homeowners association.
Awesome. Christy, go ahead.
Hi, Leah. Just maybe some clarity. Maybe that first page you had there. Just a thought. Maybe replacing. Right there. Maybe replacing homeowners with residents. I'm not sure what you think about that. It just, there's a lot of. I think we do want to get to non-homeowners as well, but
I think you're right, Christy. I think you're right because there's only so many homeowners. There's a lot of people who are renting from homeowners, people who have been here for a long time. We're going to have things to say, and that does get to everybody. But
you just don't want to give. You don't want just residents, our residents, to think that this is just geared towards homeowners. I think it would be good for everyone to sort of take part in it.
I think that's a great. Oh, sorry.
Or it could be a survey for Nantucket Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee survey for Nantucketers. I mean, more the merrier, Renters, people that come seasonally, people that come and stay in timeshares, I don't know.
Something to think about.
Or just drop for Nantucket homeowners. Just say survey, period. And let whoever wants to take it, take it.
Sarah?
Thanks. Yeah, I agree with kind of removing the homeowners, but I think we sort of went over this at the last time we went over the survey. And so if we want it to be to everybody, which I would be totally open to, then I think we don't just send it to the homeowners associations, but I thought that was sort of the goal with this one. And I also think if we're going to open it up to everyone, I think one important question would be to add a demographic of how do you identify yourself? Are you a renter, a visitor? just to qualify some of the answers, because I think if we get, depending on how we actually look at the answers, homeowners have more ability to do some of the things that we asked about on that question, but somebody else might not do anything, but it's because they can't do anything, you know? So like some of the questions, I can't remember, or like, have you done anything to your property? Or I can't remember what exactly it is, but something along those lines. So I just think if I don't want to nitpick and change right now, the whole survey right now, because we already went over it for 2 different meetings. But if we are going to open it up to everyone, which I totally think is good to get as much information as possible, we just need to like also add how people are, like, are you a homeowner? Are you a renter? I know we have year round. I think we have year round, or we have, yeah, there's the year round or seasonal. But somebody might come here for 2 weeks. And if, you know, depending on where we're putting the survey, I think it does make a difference. And can I add one other quick question? Are we going to be able to have a link to the survey that we can share around, or are you only sending it to the homeowner associations?
Peter, is it okay to answer that?
Go ahead, Leah.
Okay. So like Sarah had said, you know, we've worked on this a couple of meetings, and all of these ideas are great and were brought up, but you guys decided to just do the first part through the Civic League homeowners associations, because we didn't want to open it up too wide and get too much information first. So it's sort of just like a little pilot. And then from there, you decided that after those, you know, we've got that data back, then to open it up to the wider community, residents, and, you know, renters and business owners and such. So that was the primary intention of this. I think maybe we just write for Nantucket homeowners associations, or just have it Nantucket residents. And this will be live for a month or so. Florencia can extend it as well. And then when you decide to open it up to, you know, the wider community, then we can have, you know, the same link for that as well. So as far as sending you the link, I'm happy to do that. And I'm not sure like who else you would want to send it to, because there's the 25 associations, if you want to send it to people outside of the Civic League associations or not.
Well,
I think I think we're going with our original plan, which is to send it to the area association members and see what we get back, and then we're going to release it to everybody. And depending on what we get back from those guys, we may want to tweak the questions. Sarah, you wanted to follow up?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that the Civic League does not represent all the homeowners associations. So where I live, there's 40 homes. We have our own homeowners association, but we're not part of the Civic League. We never get any information or email or anything from the Civic League. So I'm sure there are many other neighborhoods like that too. I don't know if we just want to do it to a subset of the population, great. I just want to make sure we are all like knowing what their responses are. They're not going to represent the island homeowners. They're going to represent the people that are part of the Civic League, which is fine as long as we know what the data that we're getting back entails.
So just a point of clarification, those 25 associations are area associations, areas of the island, like Tom Nevers, like Pocomo, like Smith's Point. The Sachem's Path Homeowners Association is a specific subdivision. An area association may include area associations. So, I mean, I thought we all agreed that we wanted to send this out to area associations. So if we did, then we send that out. If not, then maybe we can revise. But we definitely have the Civic League on board. We start with them. We expand it beyond there. And so maybe that's on us to find out all the subdivision associations, get in touch with their presidents and get them the information. And I mean, we've got 3 minutes left. I think we're going to go over a little bit, but you know, we can certainly carry it to the next meeting if people feel that way. Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that, you know, the Civic League is not homeowners, it's area association, as you say. And I think it's a good starting point, but maybe we should take the word homeowners out because the Civic League doesn't know whether the people who are paying attention to them are homeowners, renters, or long-term visitors, stuff like that. So the Civic League is a good place for us to start, but the word homeowners doesn't really represent who the Civic League represents.
Thanks, Gary. Go ahead, Christy.
Yeah, after the discussion over the last few minutes, I really think probably the best way to go is with what Matt had suggested, is just remove the words at starting, you know, after a survey. This way, you're collecting data from really the same, whether you're sending it to homeowners or residents in general. This way, you're not collecting data from two sort of headlined different sort of surveys. So I think Matt is pretty spot on. I think right after right after survey, you just forget everything else. Nantucket's already in it, so you don't need to sort of specify Nantucket homeowners.
Do we all like that idea? Yes? Okay. All right. Okay, so let's move right along to the approval of the minutes from October 24. Did everybody read them? Hopefully. If there are no changes, no edits, I'll take a motion for approval.
Motion to approve.
A second from somebody?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Christy?
Aye.
Gary?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Rachel?
Abstain, I wasn't there.
Okay, Joanna?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Matt?
I'll abstain. I didn't read them.
Okay, Abby?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Okay, new business committee and natural resources department reports from Planning Board, Conservation Commission, Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board, Select Board, Advisory Committee of Non-Voting Taxpayers, and other committee members. Do we have any? Leah? Did you have your hand up, Leah?
Yes, I did. Thank you. I just wanted to give everyone an update about a couple things. So the CCM grant that is out for bid, and that closes on Monday, November 20th. And so after that closes, a couple staff members will evaluate the bids that were presented. We'll pick a consultant and then offer the contract to them by December 6th. So the select board accept contracts twice a month. So the next one after that is December 6th. So we're hoping to get it on the agenda for that. It's kind of a quick turnaround time with, you know, the bids closing and then us being able to evaluate, but everyone, all the staff members are on board for getting that done. So I'll have more of an update in the next meeting or the following meeting with that. The other update is tomorrow I'll be a guest lecturer at Brown University speaking with the undergraduate ocean resilience class. And so I'll be talking about kind of my background in shellfish restoration and how that is incorporated into the town's coastal resilience plan. So that's exciting. That will be the first time that I'm a guest lecturer at a university. And then let's see, yesterday I had Nat also attended a meeting with Shelley Lockwood and Isabel, I forget her last name, but about the potential for having a coastal resilience real estate continuing ed class on the island. And so we kind of talk through that a little bit. I have to find out a little bit more information, but it seems like there's 100 courses that are approved, and this could fall into the environmental impact class. And so real estate agents, if you don't know, they have to take a certain amount of credits every 2 years to keep their licensure. So, and also once they learn about a subject, they have to disclose it to their potential clients. So, you know, if a house is for sale that a client is interested in, let's say in Brant Point, and they take the coastal resilience class, or they know the information, you know, through the risk assessment within the plan, they have to disclose that information to those potential property owners. So it's just another way to, you know, educate the public. So more to come on that. Also last week, Vince, Libby, and I had a meeting with Julia Kinzel and Lisa Engler from CZM. Lisa is the director of CZM. And we were the first town that they contacted and had a meeting with, talking about their new plan. It's called Resilient Coasts. And so essentially what it is, it's a region-wide plan for coastal communities in Massachusetts. And I'll just read you what it is here. So they want to develop coordinated, equitable, and effective coastal resilience strategies in partnership with coastal municipalities and other coastal stakeholders that will delineate geographic zones of climate vulnerability, identify climate resilient development standards and best practices for coastal adaptation, and develop management recommendations for vulnerable areas. So within that, they are going to create coastal resilience districts, and those are different than what Nantucket is hoping to develop. Their coastal resilience districts are to show the risk of the vulnerability in different regions. And when we explain what our coastal resilience districts are, they want to work with us as they start to develop their coastal resilience districts. We'll do it in collaboration. So, you know, how they map their areas hopefully will align with how Nantucket would map our areas here. So they were interested in our version of the coastal resilience districts. Might have to change it up a little bit so people don't get confused with the wordage. But it was really exciting. We, you know, explained everything that we experience here with flooding and erosion, and you know, funding opportunities and all of that. So I sent them the coastal resilience plan and the risk assessment as well. And Vince sent them the document that you all provided to the select board with recommendations for coastal resilience districts. So they have all of that material. We told them, you know, keep us in the conversation. We want to give you whatever information would be helpful as they move through this process. So very exciting. That's all I have. Thanks, Peter.
All right, thank you, Leah. Abby, you had a question?
I was just going to add, I'm still on the historical commission, and one thing that came up at the past meeting was there was a discussion about seeing how we could integrate kind of historic preservation into some of the ongoing coastal resiliency work. So I just wanted to kind of put it out. I want to let people know that was just an area of interest that came up.
Okay, thank you. I had a question from Matt. At the Select Board Strategic Planning Retreat, did you guys discuss coastal resilience at all? Is there anything you need to share with us?
Yes, we did. It is getting it's getting a higher priority in this version of it. You know, not all the details. That's the coastal resiliency plan, and you know, the priorities, et cetera. The list is our work, but it is getting a bit more prominent. Yeah, so that's good.
Excellent. That's good.
And thank you for reminding me.
We're actually mattering. That's good to know. Okay.
I didn't say that, Peter.
No, I know, but I felt you, Matt. Okay, so discussion of upcoming meeting dates and topics. Next meeting is November 28th on Zoom. Unless we want to stay here longer, and we're over by 7 minutes. And thank you everybody for sticking it out. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay. Okay, motion to adjourn, seconded. Roll call vote. Abby Molina,
Aye.
Gary Beller,
Aye.
Sarah Boyce,
Aye.
Doug Rose,
Aye.
Rachel Freeman,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Christy Kickham,
Aye.
Matt P.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Everybody have an awesome Thanksgiving. Okay. All right. Bye.
Aye.